Welcome to Let's Talk Learning Disabilities with Laurie Peterson. Laurie spends her days talking about dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and ADHD. She talks to students and adults who have had a lifetime of academic challenges. She's here to share their stories along with other insights with you. So let's talk learning disabilities.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Learning Disabilities. This is Laurie. Just a quick note about this episode. If you have not listened to our last episode, it's actually part one of my interview with Jan Van Blarcum, an old friend who runs an amazing school. So please go back and check out the episode right before this one to hear the first part of our interview, because today we're diving right into part two and we're picking up right where we left off. So if you haven't heard the first part, go back and listen. Otherwise, please enjoy the second part of my interview with Jan. So, and I think too, it's important that, you're giving these kids an opportunity to find those things, those extracurriculars, those activities that they can excel in, that they do have time every day to give to it where they wouldn't in another school setting. The other thing though, my favorite part about your school is that there's no homework. For the most part, I know there's always an exception, but talk to me about your homework policy, because I find it, I couldn't agree with it more.
All the years that I was running a tutoring business, it was great because we were helping kids do their homework.
Right, you made a lot of money on homework.
We made a lot of money on homework, and it was fantastic. But at the end of the day, your child shouldn't have to go home and do homework when we've been teaching them all day long, and we've been with them again more hours in the day than you have them in daylight. So that's why we teach the 5-day-a-week plan. We don't do sometimes you'll have the university model, and we just don't do that. And we're able to have lecture, instruction, and time to do work together. Lecture and instruction. I would rather our teacher be the tutor who's readdressing how this math needs to be done or how this, sentence needs to be written, and not turning that over to a tutor.
Right.
Not necessarily are they going to be, really teaching the model that we need the kids to have before they go off to college. And it can be confusing. So really, homework is meant to be very limited. Really what we want is, let's just say, in math class today, you had 9 equations and you ended up walking away and still need to do 2 more. Well, you can address those equations the next day. You can address them in a tutorial time at our school. You can even stop in and see your teacher during lunch and work on those equations. Or at some point, you might say, I just have 2 equations. Let me knock these out tonight before I go to bed. That's when you've now turned the leaf on someone who's going to take advantage of the private education that you're paying for.
Right.
And we're building a skill set that's going to be, I can do this.
Independence.
I'm independent, but I want to do this. And heck, maybe I can help somebody else do this. And when you get to that, now we're working on all cylinders.
But I also think, too, that you're allowing these kids to have a life outside of school.
Oh, yeah.
They don't just go home and do more school. They get to go home and they get to participate in extracurricular activities. They can go to sports. They can hang out with friends. They get a life that's just not 24/7 academics. When I have parents call and I hear stories about kids that are up doing homework till 10 or 11 o'clock at night, it crushes me. Or kids that have had to quit a sport or quit an activity because they don't have time for it. I'm like, what do you mean they don't have time for it? Like, that's not how you develop a brain.
Well, there is an epidemic in our country with kids also being overscheduled. Mm-hmm. You should never compromise your child's sleep.
No.
Sleep is forever. And you have to create a habit, a pattern. Your child has to learn how to do that. And if you're working until 3 a.m, and listen, in my tutoring business, I had high school tutors who might start tutoring at 11:30 at night.
That's crazy.
And they were going to the child's home at that time. That was before Zoom and all of that. So it's ridiculous that you have to choose your health. Parents are feeding kids fast food because they're trying to run to certain kind of events and still do homework along the way, the juggle is just ridiculous. And so I really do talk to families about, all right, let's pick a sport. Let's pick a social activity. But let's pick time for your child to also just be at home.
And do nothing.
Now, I don't really want the kids sitting on, computer games all day. That's not what we're talking about. Let's give them an opportunity. Maybe there's puzzles out in your house, and your child used to always love puzzles. I actually have a student who I have never seen a student who can do puzzles as fast as that young man. And he's a junior,
Challenge accepted.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm not that fast. Okay. So, I've watched you from, being literally a one-room school to now being, taking over an entire building. And I know that there has been so many growing pains, and I know that this process is so rewarding, and I know that you absolutely love what you do, but I know that it has not been easy. And I know trying to come up with the number one biggest challenge to running a school is hard, but in general, what do you find has been the most challenging for you over the years when you think about running the school as a whole?
Well, currently I have 55 employees. And as we grew into that, and I actually brought today, we have a student handbook, we have our staff handbook. Really, I always had a coach along the way that was helping, sort of guide me. And then I was really fortunate, actually. My husband retired from corporate America. He's an attorney. And I asked him to sort of coach us because I realized we both kind of grew up, and he had some pretty awesome skills.
Right.
And so he's really helped us focus on what's important. I think the biggest challenge is have you heard that expression, let the dog wag the tail or the tail wag the dog?
Yeah.
Okay, well, when you're working with so many students and you're constantly growing, look, our mission is to create an environment where kids can have this amazing school, and where the parent is our customer. Sure. And I think I had to get my mind on that the parent is our customer. In the end, the child influences the parent on if it's going to be a school that's the best fit for them and how all that feels. So, it's that you have to be able to stay focused on what's really important. So you really do need to understand what your end game is. Yeah. And so along the way, I may have taken some students that might not have been the exact fit. Yeah. And that was just part of growing up.
It's just learning.
Now we understand exactly who our student is that needs to be a part of Einstein, and we look at the whole family, because sometimes the parents might have been in environments that they felt they had to really fight to get what they needed. And if I feel like I'm going to have a parent that may create more work than we really need because they're already up for the fight.
Right.
And that happens every now and again, that we'll find somebody and we'll say, no, it's not. At Einstein,
right,
we create a comprehensive educational matrix where that's our Cliff Notes version of an IEP or a 504. We are going to make sure that your child's accommodations are embedded in their day-to-day experience at Einstein. Because ultimately, when it is time for them to take an ACT or an SAT test, when it's time for them to go to college and receive support services there, they have to prove and show that they've received their support. So our whole community is about providing the support that your child needs. And in a classroom, there could be a student who has lots of needs. There could be, and in that same classroom, there's somebody who doesn't.
Yeah.
And so really being able to focus on the different pieces of making the system run efficiently, it really went down to what were our policies and procedures, and we had to really work hard as a group. So we've created mission statements and philosophy, and we've created our core values.
That's your foundation. I mean, that's so important.
That's it, and we train all of our staff. So we actually are a school that is open 12 months out of the year. Lots of little small schools will close up during the summer, and it's a budgetary thing. So we offer summer school, but we're training our teachers. We're helping them understand the philosophy of the school. As I bring somebody new into our fold as a teacher, we're spending a great amount of time helping them observe other classes, helping them understand how curriculum is built. If they can understand all these fundamentals, then they're going to be great in the classroom eventually. And in the maybe first few months, they're going to be teachers that are asking me, do I have permission to do this or do I have permission to do that, until they really begin to understand. But I knew yesterday I took a family on a tour, and a lower school family, and one of my middle school teachers had stepped out to sort of talk to the family, and I asked, oh, please review our writing curriculum, our writing process. And so I loved it because the teacher said, I usually teach high school students, but Jan asked me to teach 7th and 8th graders this year. And I did, because I knew she would be able to make sure that our 7th and 8th graders are really going to be ready for the rigor of our high school. And I knew she had the personality for the students. So there was a lot. I think maybe when she heard it,
she was like,
the first week of thinking about it, she was like, okay. but then she talked to me about the experience in public education, in some of the literature that the children are reading during middle school is really dark.
Yeah.
There's a lot about, they're approaching discussions about suicide and about some big problems that are happening in like society or are being infiltrated into the literature that students are reading during middle school. Mm-hmm. Well, I looked at her and I said, look, we need to open the window and let the sunshine in. We have beautiful pieces of literature that our young students should be reading. And for some of our very, very young ones, one of our pieces that we did this year was The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil Lee Frank Weiler. That's a book I read. and I can tell you, as a dyslexic person, that was the first book I read that I loved.
Oh, wow.
So I have a very sentimental feeling about this particular book. Well, so when I said to this teacher, we need to let the sunshine in. It was funny. She said, we need to offer The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil Lee. Ding, ding, ding. I'm like, we're on the same page. So teachers also have the ability to contribute into the pool of what we teach.
I love that.
And so ironically, we did a Myers-Briggs personality test for our school and for the teachers, and we are 98% creatives.
Shocker.
That's right. So when you come to Einstein, even our math teachers, even like our chemistry teachers, they are super creative individuals. And I think when you bring that joy, the creativity, you bring all of these new pieces, and you have that foundation of these policies that we've worked together and built them over I don't think the school, if I had written policies and procedures that way in day one, they would never be the same as they are now. So these evolve, and we look at them. Every year we do a weekly True North leadership meeting, and we stay late at night and we're going through that. But it helps us ground us. And last year during, I guess it was the spring, I've wanted something for our school called the Einstein Creed. And finally last year, we utilized AI to get our ideas down. Absolutely. And then we completely tore apart what AI wrote. But we created our Einstein Creed from that, and we announced it last year at our graduation ceremony. So this year, it's plastered everywhere, and we have amazing art. We have very bold art. We're not about having kids in a drab environment, because we really want them to be inspired by the creativity of all people. And so we have, all of our staff members are part of that. Well, the Einstein Creed was a big piece of what we offered last year. And so we've got kids this year memorizing the Einstein Creed. It's so funny. They'll come up and say, I have this many, stanzas of it. And it's really fantastic.
That's pretty cute. Mm-hmm. So my least favorite thing about your school, if I have to be honest with you, is that it's just one location. And I can't, there are so many kids I think would benefit from this setting and from this environment and from what you have to offer. And I think what I also love too is, you are there to help the kids. And if this child needs to come to your school for just 1 year to get what they need, you're fine with that. You're not trying to suck them in. You're not trying to bring them in and change them. You want to just help them get to where they need to be, wherever that is. So I know you dabbled with the online stuff for a while. Is that something you still do for kids? Is it something you want to do? Like, where are you with that?
Wow, that's a big question.
I know.
I would love to be able to offer multiple locations in my lifetime in Texas. But it comes back to a funding problem.
Oh, absolutely.
It's always about the money, right? We probably are the best kept secret in our area, and the pricing of our tuition is far below what other schools, are charging. And some of that is really because I want to make sure that it's available for everybody. And we don't spend a whole lot of time trying to fundraise. That's a whole other department that needs to be built. And So it's really the money that keeps us, from being able to open another. And I say Texas because I think, like I mentioned, I'm 62. I feel like I could open Texas and have other branches. Just education laws are different in other states, so we'd have to have partnerships, I think, in some of those. I never would want the program to ever feel commercialized. And there are some great programs out there that help families, but they are corporations. We're a nonprofit. So we have this granular sort of, feel to us. I believe that to help kids who are in other states, we could be a hybrid to maybe what you're doing with a homeschool program. Maybe there are other states may have programs where there's, the high school model where there's 2 days a week or 3 days a week. Easily those we can be a part of because everything's still available through Zoom and being able to dial in.
And you dial into the classroom.
Yes.
It's not where they're just sitting in front of watching it. It's just not a teacher one-on-one. They're part of the class.
They're part of the class. We have because of Zoom and because of a pandemic, we put cameras in the classroom so that the student could have they could be looking at students and having discussion that way.
And I love that.
Or they could be looking at a teacher, having discussion that way. We had students, during that time that might have gone to India, for example, and we had no idea where they were in the world because it worked so well. When there is problems with the online version, it's really been when someone's at-home network is not strong enough.
Yeah.
And their computers are not the quality that they need. So we've had, a couple of people who've struggled because they thought it was our technology. Well, we know it's not ours. Ours is our bandwidth, and we put in a lot of, resources into making it work because as we've grown, we've had to add things. But it's really, do you have the technology at home to really have a fully engaged learning environment?
Okay. I feel like...
So you can move to Texas.
You can always move to Texas. But I like, we have a lot of homeschool families, and I like that as a complement to what you're doing at home, having, especially for like those chemistry and the higher level math. Those are hard for a lot of homeschool families to do. And so when you get up to those levels, to have someone there to help you and to complement what you're doing.
Well, you can observe in that environment, you can observe the science experiments happening in the lab.
Exactly.
So we have all of our classes have about 45% of the science class is with a lab, with lab instruction.
The hands-on.
Mm-hmm.
That's so important.
It's amazing to me how many students come to Einstein and they'll say, we didn't do any chemistry experiments. I've never done a dissection.
You're like, what?
I'm like, what are you talking about?
You were in a science class?
You were in science class? What do you mean? And in our forensics class, we do a fetal pig autopsy. That's a pretty intensive.
That's pretty amazing.
That's pretty amazing. In the chemistry, we have a fume hood, so there's all different kinds of experiments happening in that fume hood. My sewing class, we have the kids who are taking textiles and sewing. They actually do experiments in that fume hood to understand. Let's talk about silk and what happens with it because it's very flammable. And this is maybe why we don't ever buy baby pajamas and silk.
Right.
So we're trying to help our actually that sewing class is really fantastic for kids with dyslexia and disabilities or with anxiety.
It's very soothing.
It's soothing, and you're making patterns. Mm-hmm. So that patterning is really important. And so there's other ways
to work your brain.
To work your brain. Our classes the small instruction really helps that dyslexic student or a struggling student receive maybe training that you would have through programs like Take Flight or other just
or Gillingham kind of things.
Yes, some of that is just embedded in the class.
Yeah.
So you don't need as much support service typically. By the time a fifth grader comes to the Einstein School, and we do take some fourth, but by the time a fifth grader, they have worked through most of the initial reading. But the next step is writing, composition, and so it's all embedded in the class.
Okay, so if someone is interested in talking to you about what you do, if they're interested in watching some of your classes, or maybe they're somewhere and they're thinking, I want to partner with Jan and open up an Einstein School where I live, what's the best way to find you?
Ironically, I give everybody my cell phone number, 214-282-6268. You can text me, you can call me. I will answer that call and I will get back with you.
And she will.
I will. I mean, even the numbers that are on our website, they forward to me, to my cell phone. Mm-hmm. So I'm serious about helping families. I'm serious about helping kids. If you are concerned about something that's going on in your life, I'm happy to brainstorm with you and talk to you about it.
I think Jan and I are so much alike in that way. Like when you're talking about your tuition pricing, like we feel we have that same mentality. Like we want to keep it as low as we can because we want to be able to help as many people as we can. And even at the price point that we're at, it's still a lot of money for a lot of people. But if we can just help that one more person, it will make all the difference in the world.
And, I want to remind you of a time that you and I went on a meeting together to a family that was wanting tutoring. And the child really had visual processing problems.
Yep.
And all the tutoring in the world
wouldn't have helped.
Was not going to help him until we could get the visual processing. And we sat there and we talked to those parents.
Yep.
We gave our evening up. We went to their house.
We talked ourselves right out of a job.
We did. But it was the best thing ever.
Yep.
And something, that kid doesn't hate school.
No.
They got their visual processing, worked through.
Yeah.
And they were able to learn on their own.
And that's the thing too. If a student comes to you and you're not the place, where the place is. It's not they're gonna be like, sorry, no thanks, but you're gonna help guide them to where they need to be. So
yeah, I get calls from families who are looking for preschool programs.
Yeah, us too.
Yes, and I have places to send
them
based on what their needs are.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for taking time. I know you're so busy. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and record a conversation because we get to chit chat occasionally, but this has been really fun.
Yeah, and I love what you do.
Thank you. Thank you,
Jan.
Thank you
so much. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course.
Appreciate it.
If you guys have any questions, you're always welcome to email me at letstalklearningdisabilities@gmail.com. If you have a friend that you think might be interested, please feel free to share this episode. You can like this episode, comment on it if you have any comments to make. Thank you guys for being here. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining us today. In our show notes, you can find information about today's talk, as well as links to resources and other episodes. If you have questions about today's talk, have ideas for future episodes, or just want to stay connected, you can contact us through Diagnostic Learning Services on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So, let's keep talking learning disabilities. This podcast is sponsored by eDiagnostic Learning. You can find more information at www.ediagnosticlearning.com.